Hello everybody, I'm Chris Bargo and welcome back to Novel Album Review. Today I'm going to be looking at 1968, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. The fourth studio album by the band, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, as well as Arthur Brown, the man from the band The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. For those who don't know, Arthur Brown is a singer-songwriter-showman who goes around performing live while wearing a boning helmet. Think you can't see any strange costumes or gimmicky helmets listening to a record? Think again. Arthur Brown knows no such limitations. How do I even begin to explain this album? Other than it being the perfect Halloween album, the only way I can really explain it is that it is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. If you like A Nightmare Before Christmas, Castlevania, or mid-20th century horror movies, then you would probably like this. The most prominent sounds on this album are Arthur Brown's vocals and electric organ. Lots and lots of electric organ. You take what the Doors had, then increase that level tenfold. By the time this album is over, your brain will be completely drenched in electric organ. There are also all kinds of strange noises just all over the place, wind instruments as well as moody blues-like spoken word parts. Everything about 60s psychedelia, whether it be good or bad, has been dialed up way past 11 on this album. One of popular music's greatest mysteries is how this album became commercially successful, as it really is one of the most out there things imaginable. Still, I suppose the album cover really stands out on a shelf, and it helps that this had Kit Lambert and Pete Townsend working on it behind the scenes. It's hard to believe it looking back, but this album was a smash hit when it came out, despite its relative obscurity these days. Now, before we start the song-by-song breakdown, the way these videos work is that I will break this album down song-by-song before finally giving my final thoughts and ranking of the album. I would like to encourage everyone to bear with my ramblings and watch the whole video, as I do as always have a lot to say. Prelude-Nightmare starts the album off with some very soft flute noises. Very quickly, my speakers start vomiting up some bassy electric keyboard concoction that Brown has cooked up. Arthur Brown is screaming all over the place about who knows what. He keeps screaming, "Why is it so cold out here?" and decides to be warm. He needs to go to hell, I guess. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but side one of this album does seem to follow a rough narrative about hell. I just love the way Arthur Brown screams about the cold. I think it's hilarious someone would sell their soul because they hate the cold and think that hell is hot. Again, I don't really know if that's what's really going on in the song, but still, it's really bizarre and quite enjoyable if you are able to indulge in it. Fanfare-Fire Poem starts off with a short trumpet fanfare before going to more of the same organ-soaked backing. Brown then recites a spoken word segment, supposedly a poem, about going to hell. After wanting to go over on the last song, he arrives here, and once he sees hell, he decides, maybe this is not a nice place, and then he tries to leave. This does not go well for him. Fire is an unlikely hit single. At the beginning, an echoing Brown declares himself to be the god of hellfire in the hammiest way imaginable. This is probably the most memorable moment in the entire album, and it's just hilarious to me for some reason. In between Brown's alternating deep voice and falsetto, we have lots of organ and horn fanfares. Now, what we have here is essentially a villain character song from a musical. Imagine if the Heat Miser was literally Satan himself. That's really the only way I can explain this song. Fire is, much like the rest of the album, really bizarre and hard to describe other than full-throttle weirdness. Still, it is the song of the album that works the best outside of the album format, and it has one of the most memorable openings of any song. Come and Buy is about some sort of temptation, I guess. The single seems to be some sort of otherworldly merchant, but I'm really not sure of the thematic meaning here. Still, the only part of this song is a bit slower than the rest of the album up until this point, and makes for a nice break in the pace. We also get a reprise of the Nightmare section from the beginning of the album. Both the changes in tempo and the reprise help add to the illusion that the album is telling a narrative, even if said narrative is disjointed and meaningless. Time is another slower track, one which is bass-dominated, and with a bit of a sinister jazzy vibe to it. This song seems to be about the inevitability of death, and everyone going down the path to damnation. Confusion is not really its own track, but another reprise of Nightmare. I could have sworn that we last heard Brown asking, "Why is it so cold out here?" just a couple of minutes ago, but here it is reprised again. This is supposed to be the end bookend of the story this time, and I'm still not really sure what happened in the narrative Brown was trying to convey. It started out very energetic, and then cooled down into a more simmering, sinister song, but I really feel like there should have been some grand finale at the end. I guess the final message is about the inevitability of how someone will always trade their soul to Satan for some warmth in an endless cycle. It kind of works when you think about it like that, actually. Now, before we go on to side 2 of the album, I want to remind you that if you like this style of album review, to please like this video by hitting the thumbs up button below. Hit the subscribe button, and consider watching some of my other videos after this one is through, as all these things help me out a lot. I Put a Spell on You is a cover of the Screaming Jay Hawkins song. While Orville Brown's whole shtick is very similar to Hawkins, there isn't much here to justify this cover. It does fit in well with the album's overall sound well, and it does pay proper homage to one of Brown's most apparent influences. Despite this, it does take more than adding an electric organ to make a cover really worth it as a studio track. This is a diligent cover. It's not particularly any worse than the original song, but it's not better either. It does, however, work well enough in this format. Spontaneous Apple creation is certainly something. The lyrics are nonsensical even for this album, describing scenes of bizarre chaos in something called the Great Spontaneous Apple Creation. The backing is comprised mainly of weird beeps and boops and spacey noises. If I had to explain the song Spontaneous Apple Creation in any way, it would be to compare it to the soundtrack and sense of humor of the video game Earthbound. It is admittedly not very helpful of a comparison on my end, considering I'm comparing this song to a video game that came out 25 years later, but at the same time, that's really the only way I can describe it. West's Cure sticks out like a sore thumb on the album. In this song, the singer talks about how when bad things are happening in life, the person he is singing to can rely on him to give them West cures to make them feel better. What is a West cure? Is this something like Bridge Over Troubled Water? The backing is also different, being almost devoid of the electric organ that has dominated most of the rest of the album. It's still there, but a lot quieter and more subdued compared to a regular piano and the bass. It is a little strange that Orville Brown decided to go for this Beach Boys-esque peaceful, easy listening song, but hey, it adds to the variety of the album, I guess. So it does feel like a major tonal shift for the album. Money is a cover of the James Brown song, I've Got Money. While this is a bit more out of the left field compared to I Put a Spell on You, I guess Orville Brown's screaming is an inferior derivative of James Brown's screaming, so I guess it does make sense for Brown to pay homage to another one of his influences here. Child of My Kingdom is another psychedelic song with lots of ominous keyboards. There's only so much I could say about a song like this that I didn't already say about the album as a whole. But this track is nice and funky, and has the second best chorus of the original songs of the album after Fire. Child of My Kingdom also has a nice bit with some whistling that adds in a bit more of a poppy feel to it that helps neutralize the more psychedelic elements. As such, Child of My Kingdom helps see the album out much as it began. Deeply weird, and fully unashamed. Now, usually I do the song-by-song breakdown here, but to be honest, I don't even know how to begin to rank most of the songs on here. Some of the songs covered here aren't really even songs, but reprises or poems, so I guess I will have to use my own judgment when deciding what songs to actually give scores to. Prelude-Nightmare, 6 out of 10. Fire, 7 out of 10. Coming By, 6 out of 10. Time, 6 out of 10. I Put a Spell on You, 5 out of 10. Spontaneous Apple Creation, 6 out of 10. West Cure, 5 out of 10. Money, 5 out of 10. Child of My Kingdom, 6 out of 10. With the exception of Fire, most of the songs on side 1 can't really stand on their own, but do work together pretty well in conjunction to tell a sort of pseudo-story. Side 2 is, on the other hand, a mess of random stuff thrown together. Covers, pop, and the stuff that is more similar to the first half of the album. Side 1 here is strong, despite the disjointedness of its story. It manages to succeed at what it set out to do. The music, when combined with the hammy theatrics of Orville Brown's voice, manages to convey a feeling of a nightmarish hellscape. The lyrics are nonsensical, but that only helps add to the vibe. The whole thing sounds like a nightmare that refuses to operate under any logical rules. This isn't everyone's cup of tea, of course, but if you are able to find joy in the delicious ridiculousness of it all, then you can have a really good time with this. Side 2, while by no means bad, feels very disjointed. While Spontaneous Apple Creation has a wonderfully ridiculous lyric to it, and Child of My Kingdom lives up to the standard of side 1, there isn't too much to say either way for the rest of the back half of the album. The cover will sound fine when listening to the album, but don't do anything to justify their own existence. Similarly, West Go is a good break from the hand-me-dork and despair, but doesn't act as much more than a pacing device. While the legend that is Awful Brown has mostly flown under the public's radar since the end of the 1960s, his influence still remains. You can see the influence of this record reverberate throughout the 1970s. From the doom and gloom of Black Sabbath, Peter Gabriel's elaborate costumes and makeup of Genesis, to the elaborate sets of David Bowie's Diamond Dogs tour, as well as Alice Cooper's whole persona. All of this can be traced back to this album. Glam rock, progressive rock, and heavy metal all owe a great debt to Awful Brown. So while a lot of elements of the crazy world of Awful Brown would be done better elsewhere, it still stands up as a very original package in and of itself. Side 2 is take it or leave it. I would say this album is worth buying for side 1 alone. Sure, it is a bit gimmicky and doesn't really show any instrumental proficiency, but it does manage to elicit a few laughs from me every time I put it on. So overall, I give The Crazy World of Awful Brown a 7 out of 10 for being the cozy, hammy horror movie that we all need every October for Halloween. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, as it does come on quite strong, but I quite enjoy it, perhaps for more than I should. And before we end, I of course want to look at the album's packaging. Here is the front cover. You've got Awful Brown, he's in makeup or something, it's very distorted, it's very psychedelic, he's got these weird glasses, he's got this weird expression. The title of the album's up here. A suitably strange picture for a suitably strange album. You know, say what you will, but if you saw this on a store shelf in the 60s, you'd be like, wow, that's strange and looks unique. You wouldn't be like, oh, this is a Frank Sinatra album, or oh, this is a gospel album, or oh, this is the Beatles. You'd be like, what on earth is this? So yeah, this kind of represents side 1. I think the back kind of represents side 2. It's a more normal picture of the guy, although he does have a very strange look on his face, and it's in this kind of weird silvery sort of way. You've got also kind of a blurb up here about Awful Brown. It's kind of like a newspaper review of him, supposedly by Charles Fox, New Statesman, whatever that is. I'm assuming it's a paper. And yeah, there's really not too much to say for the back. It's a pretty nice sleeve. I kind of like it, actually. It looks suitably ridiculous, much like the music. And yeah, that's basically it for this review. If you made it this far in the video, I would like to thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Happy Halloween, everyone.